some of the stories that we're talking about, you know, the first cousin marriage in particular, these are just jaw-dropping decisions, aren't they? Absolutely jaw-dropping.
What the NHS is doing, and it's given this sort of eulogy about how first cousin marriages are very good for community harmonious relations, how it's good for, you know, Muslim communities' economic welfare and so on and so all this social, economic and communal good things, they say, come of first cousin marriages. This is the NHS advice. But here's the fact, and we'll talk about this later. The fact is that a first cousin marriage, intermarriage as they call it, Pakistani Muslims are very keen on this, but Muslims generally support first cousin marriages. It's not illegal in this country, by the way. A lot of people say it should be, but it's not. But here's the statistic, that a child born of an intermarriage, a first cousin marriage, is literally twice as likely to be born with birth defects than a child born of, shall we say, a normal marriage. That's the facts. Twice as likely, and yet the NHS says, well, you know, yeah, but, you know, it's very good for the community. The Muslims like it. It's prioritising a kind of wokery over medical safety for children. It's unbelievable. We'll talk about that later. Let's kick off with something that is far more believable, but nevertheless extremely annoying. Keir Starmer, he just cannot learn the lesson, can he? A year or so ago, he was busy calling all people who protested about the migrant crisis in the wake of the Southport killings far right. There may have been some far-right demonstrators, but the police investigation into those riots proved, beyond all doubt, that the vast majority of those rioters were not far-right. Keir Starmer just made that up because it fits in with his political worldview. Now he's off again. Because Nigel Farage and millions of British citizens, Reform supporters as well as other British citizens, are extremely worried about something called indefinite leave to remain. That is this bizarre system whereby if you come to this country, be it legally, illegally, stick around illegally, stick around after your visa ends, whatever, manage to stay here by whatever means for 5 years. That's like the magic marker moment. Oh, you did 5 years. You can stay forever. So basically, if anyone, any migrant, any foreigner, no matter how they got into this country, manages to stick around for 5 years, at that point, almost automatically, Britain gives them indefinite leave to remain. They can stay for the rest of their lives. Now, that is a slapdash system that is almost bizarre. It's bizarre. Nigel Farage says we've got to do something about it. You know, we've got to stop just automatically giving people indefinite leave to remain. And look, we also ought to look at some of the people we've given indefinite leave to remain, you know, who've never worked, brought all their relatives over, are costing us a fortune with welfare. Maybe have a look at with their status. All he's essentially saying is that from now on, you know, after 5 years, 2 years, whatever, you know, by all means, let these people apply for indefinite leave to remain, but let's be a lot more strict about how many people we let to do it. Now, loads of people around the country, millions of people share that concern. You know, we have this Boris wave. Boris let in 3.8 million legal migrants who, over the next couple of years, will qualify for indefinite leave to remain, and that literally could cause a kind of welfare tsunami that could bankrupt this country. Nigel Farage is saying, well, we've got to do something about this. What's Starmer's response to that? He calls Nigel Farage racist, he calls the Reform policy racist, and effectively calls millions of Reform supporters and other concerned citizens racists. He just cannot get it through his head that this isn't good enough. Just because there are people out there who do not agree with his open borders policies doesn't make them racist. And I think this will backfire on him badly. The mood in the country that this Prime Minister of ours has done it again, and calling us all racist, far-right racists. The mood in this country is very angry.
I genuinely couldn't believe my ears when I heard him saying this again. I mean, does this guy not have any awareness whatsoever of the impact that those sorts of words have on his own party's poll rating? I mean, this is very much like Brexit, isn't it? And it's also very much like, what Hillary Clinton famously said about Trump supporters, a basket of deplorables. This sort of language is so demeaning and insulting to millions, genuinely millions of people who have perfectly reasonable, legitimate concerns about the sheer number of people coming into our country. This isn't about nationalities, although as Julia Hartley-Brewer was saying earlier in her show today, it is a fact that certain nationalities are linked to certain types of crime than other nationalities. That is simply a fact, and people can like it or not like it, but it's a fact. But in general, those who are concerned about immigration are not actually obsessing about skin color. What they're obsessing about is, number one, sheer quantity, volume, the actual number of people coming, number one. And number two, are those people net contributors or net liabilities? Are they adding to our economy and to the richness of our national life, or are they taking away from it? And I'm afraid the evidence is that, on balance, of those Boris Wave individuals, they are not, on average, net contributors.
83% of them, Isabel, are not.
Yeah, so pretty overwhelming,
workers.
really.
They're not workers. So 83% of the Boris Wave have never contributed anything to this country. Many of them are allegedly studying at universities and whatever, but they've never worked and therefore never contributed. And when they qualify for indefinite leave to remain, not only will that be a bad thing for our welfare system, they'll start bringing all their relatives over as well. So literally people are worried, and for once I say literally correctly. Literally people are worried that this could bankrupt the nation.
I mean, Keir Starmer, I'm genuinely mystified as to why it's so difficult for him to understand. I would like to ask him, where is your proof? Where is your evidence that people who are worried about this and angry about it are racist? Show me the evidence, because there is no evidence that they're racist. That is an assumption on the part of the Prime Minister. I'm afraid an awful lot in the Labour Party actually agree with it. And that is in large part driving more support for Nigel Farage. And why they can't see the connection between these two things, I don't know. But if they carry on in this vein, all they're doing is recruiting more reform supporters.
And you want to know something, right? People like you and me, quite a lot of politicians, Nigel Farage is very used to it. People like you and me are used to it. Julia's used to it. Mike Graham, because we are not exactly famous for our left-wing views. We may just be slightly right of centre in our worldview, our outlook. A lot of people call us racist. You're racist. You're racist. And they bandy that term around so much that it's become almost meaningless. Yeah. But here's the thing. Clearly, these Labour people, Starmer's crew, Keir's crew up at Liverpool, they're so trapped in their own little bubble, they think, oh, racist. If we call someone racist, that will completely ruin them. People will be against them then. They don't realise that they've undermined the very use of that term racist, because they throw it at anyone who doesn't agree with them, and that around the country people will not respond to this. But up at the Labour conference, they think we've cracked it. We've cracked it. We're going to call Nigel Farage and Reform racists. That'll ruin them. It will have the opposite effect. Honestly, they are pathetic victims of their own little bubble, aren't they?
It is absolutely pathetic. And how can you continue credibly to hurl those types of insults around at a party that has as its policy chief a Muslim, at a party that I know you're going to be interviewing later, that has many prominent people of different ethnicities, of different religions, I mean, come on, guys, is this really the best that you can throw at reform? Because if this is as good as it gets, you're out at the next election. It's actually embarrassing. This is juvenile politics. But what worries me is that they actually think this. It's not just that they think it will damage reform. It's that they genuinely believe it because their little minds are incapable of coming up with anything that's more sophisticated by way of analysis.
That's exactly what it is, Isabel. You can imagine them, war gaming. Right, Nigel Farage reform, they rise and rise. They're so successful. They're winning all the polls by a country mile. They're making us look bad. How can we beat him? How can we attack him? How can we undermine him? Somebody, oh no, let's call him a racist. Yeah, it's pathetic. It is so pathetic because when he calls Nigel Farage a racist, he calls millions of reform supporters racists, and he calls millions of other people who are very concerned about the migrant crisis racists as well. He has this thing about attacking his own electorate, and he can't seem to grow out of it.
It's completely mad, and it will do for them. And, I would say that it was actually effective some years ago. This smear actually cost Reform or Brexit Party candidates seats in other elections. It doesn't work anymore because the evidence to the contrary is so completely overwhelming. There is not actual evidence that any key Reform figures are, quote, racist. And at the same time, there is overwhelming, breathtaking, staggering evidence for the reason for normal people, ordinary people, decent people to be worried about the scale of mass uncontrolled immigration. So this slur doesn't work. In fact, all it does is add to Reform's poll ratings. And I would be not at all surprised if next week's polls show Reform having gone up a little bit more.
And do you know what it really is? We've got to go to break now, Isabel, but these people, the Starmers of this world, these Labour halo polishers, when they go, "You're a racist," what they really mean is, "I'm not a racist. Aren't I wonderful?" It's halo polishing. It's virtue signalling. And as I just said, they've bandied it around for the past few years so much that they've undermined the power of calling someone racist. They've made the insult, the attack, almost meaningless, and that's why this pathetic attempt to undermine Reform, Nigel Farage and their migrant policies just will not work. The racism angle does not operate anymore. Funnily enough, though, when we come back, we're going to talk about Shabana Mahmood, who basically has come up with all these ideas to crack down on the migrant crisis, on the influx of migrants, which are pretty similar to Nigel Farage's ideas. So as I said in my monologue, it's like if Reform UK said we've got these ideas about cracking down on the influx of migrants and what to do about the crisis, that's immoral and racist. If Labour have pretty much the same ideas, that's saintly and moral. Again, it's just pathetic. We'll talk about that after this break. Welcome back. I'm still with Talk's international editor, Isabel Oakshott. Yeah, Isabel, the Home Secretary, the not at all tough Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood. I wish people would divest themselves. She's hard as nails, she's so tough. Even the Spectator magazine, the Bible of the right, this week had her all done up like a gangster, as if she was tough. She's not tough. You brought us that video of her handing out food parcels to migrants breaking into Greece from the Middle East and Africa. Oh, we've got food for them and all this sort of stuff. That's her 10 years ago. She won't leave the European Convention on Human Rights, so everything else she does is just piddling around the edges. If she's so tough, why are we still putting migrants into 4-star hotels? Why are we still giving them free food, free accommodation, free doctors, free dentists, free lawyers, free everything else? If she's so tough, why are we still doing that? So she's not very tough, but she is now resorting to reality TV style sound bites. She said about the small boats. She said this before her speech today at the Labour conference. Failure on the small boats is not an option. That's what they say on Big Brother. Failure's not an option. Let me
They've
tell.
already failed.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you. As long as we continue to give migrants, illegal migrants, free accommodation, free food, free doctors, free dentists, free lawyers, and so many more enticements, failure to stop the boats is not an option. It is a cast iron, guaranteed certainty. But here's Shabana pretending to be tough at the hilarious Labour conference in Liverpool today.
When people see small boats arriving on our shores, they see a country that has lost control. When they hear of widespread illegal working, undercutting British workers, they feel the system is rigged. And when they see crime, unchecked, on unsafe streets, they feel fearful. This was the inheritance that the Conservatives left behind for us, and their current irrelevance is the price that they have paid. So it now falls to us to rise to this challenge. If we do not, our vision of an open, tolerant and generous country will wither. And where we fail, others will succeed.
Yeah, well, Shabana, you will fail because you don't want to leave the ECHR. Leaving the ECHR, Isabel, as I always say, look, it's not the cure-all. By leaving the ECHR, we won't magically, instantly solve our migrant crisis, but it is the essential stepping stone, bedrock move that we have to make. We have to start from there, then we can start making our own sovereign decisions without being overruled by a foreign court, which is what's happening at the moment. So she's suggesting today that there should be a good citizen test for all migrants coming in. You know, they must be able to speak English, they must be able to completely crime-free record, no criminal record, and so on and so forth. The point is, they come in, they don't have any documents, you know. So have you ever committed any crimes? Do you have a criminal record? Yes, I do. I'm a rapist and I'm a murderer. They're not likely to say that, are they? They're going to continue lying. So that's not going to work. But in this alleged crackdown, all she's doing is echoing the sort of things that Reform UK are saying. In other words, apart from the fact that Reform UK will leave the ECHR, in other words, as I said before the break, when Labour propose a migrant crackdown, it's saintly and moral. When Reform UK propose a migrant crackdown, it is immoral and racist. And by the way, her policies, one in, one out, going so well, aren't they? Just 895 foreigners crossed the Channel illegally on Saturday. One mega, not so small boat, this is a brand new kind of dinghy, had 125 people in it alone, and tragically one dinghy sank and 2 people drowned. That was on Saturday alone. So don't stand there, Shabana, and tell us that you're the one to do anything about the migrant crisis. Since you took over in September, it's hard to believe, but it's got a lot worse. This woman is being vaunted as the one who's going to do it. She's got no idea, has she?
Well, I mean, I might have sat up and listened to that speech from Shabana Mahmood had it been delivered a year and a half ago, for example. You know, had it been delivered before Labour came into office and did absolutely the square root of nothing whilst shouting endlessly about smashing the gangs, I might have had some sort of, I don't know, little sense of anticipation that something might change. But in actual fact, what's happened is under every indicator, the crisis has got worse. And I am so fed up and so bored of hearing left-wingers and Labour Party conference types wanging on about tolerance. I'm not feeling at all tolerant, and neither is most of the country. We're fed up of being tolerant. We're fed up of having our tolerance exploited, abused, totally and utterly misused. This fetishization of tolerance has led us where we are, actually. The whole kind of let's not be judgy about where someone's come from or what horrors they may have committed. Let's give them a cup of tea and wrap them in a warm blanket and put them in a top hotel. No, we are actually not feeling tolerant like that. What we want is a bit of judgment about whether the people coming in are going to be good for our country or not. And I'm afraid the vast majority of those who break the law and come over to our country in small boats are not really setting an example about how they plan to treat our hospitality.
So when she says failure on the small boats is not an option, that's a quote from Arnold Schwarzenegger's films, the Terminator movies. And the Home Secretary, as I say, really annoyingly, The Spectator, as edited by Michael Gove, who really ought to learn the nature of political opposition. No, Michael, we oppose Labour, you know what I mean? He puts her all over the front of her glasses and calls her the Terminator. This tough Home Secretary. The Terminator. Do me a favour. She's not going to terminate anything, is she? As long as she stays in the ECHR, nothing is going to happen.
I mean, warm words or punchy words are all that is. You know, what people care about is actions. I've seen all the gushing reports about her, you know, hard as nails speech and how she's striking all the right tones, a steely determination. None of that means anything to anybody. I don't care how steely she may look, how shiny, how professional, how moral, whatever you might want to say, from the stage of a Labour talking shop. What I want to see is things changing very tangibly, very obviously. Now, I will have respect for Shabana Mahmood if in a couple of months' time she finds that she is basically unable to do anything to stop the boats or anything else that she's set herself the target to do, and she resigns. Then I'll have some respect for her. But I confidently predict that will not happen. And she will just carry on periodically giving us steely words and nothing will change.
Even old cautious Kemi Badenoch has finally realised that just maybe it might be an idea for the Tories to embrace a policy of leaving the ECHR. It's taken her about 2 years, but she's finally got there. If we don't leave the ECHR, nothing can be done. Of course, the ECHR is a sort of merry-go-round, all the fun of the fair for human rights lawyers like Keir Starmer. So we will never leave. So she has no plans, as I say. Let me ask the audience this. Look, this is where our tough talking Terminator Home Secretary stands on how she's going to tackle the migrant crisis, how she's going to stop it. She has no plans. She wants to stay in the European Convention of Human Rights, which means we will always be subordinate to a foreign court. So when our sovereign decisions are not to the likings of human rights lawyers, the case is taken to the ECHR, the European Court of Human Rights, and they invariably decide against us, and we have to do what we're told. So she wants to stay in that system. She wants to continue to give illegal migrants free, expensive accommodation in 4-star hotels. She wants to continue to give them free food. She wants to continue to give them free doctors. She wants to continue to give them free dentists. She wants to continue to give them free lawyers. Now, let me ask the audience, given that that's what she wants to do, how do you think she stands a snowball's chance in hell of solving the migrant crisis? So she's saying, I'm tough, I'm prepared to be unpopular, failure is not an option. Failure, as I say, with that set of policies, failure is not an option. Failure is a cast iron guarantee. Let me know what you think, folks. 03444 499 1000. When we come back, Isabel, I'm sure you're a massive fan of the new digital ID cards, because I'll tell you, apparently, according to Labour, there is growing public support for Keir Starmer's Soviet-style brick cards. No, there isn't. No, there isn't. That is such a lie. We'll talk about that next. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Well, it's time now. I'm still with Talk's international editor, Isabel Oakshott. Let's talk about ID cards. Isabel, you know, this Labour conference, I was watching it at home today with an increasing sense of real fury and frustration. You know, these people standing there, they're making all these speeches one after the other. Shabana Mahmood, Brigitte Phillipson, David Lammy, worst of all, Rachel from Accounts, delivering these speeches, sort of assuring us that Labour have had a very, very good first year, fixing the foundations. All they seem to talk about, they've been told to go out with this set of buzzwords that they think will win us round to supporting them. One, of course, is reformer racists. The other is breakfast clubs. They all go, they've got free breakfast clubs at school. I don't even know what that is, but they're not free because taxpayers are paying for them. But they're all going out, we've delivered breakfast clubs. Oh, great. That's fantastic. So they're all their breakfast clubs and fixing the foundations. They don't realise that they go, we've been fixing the foundations, delivering breakfast clubs at school. They don't realise that fixing the foundations has become a national laughingstock. Everybody laughs when they say that, but they don't realise that in their cosseted little Westminster world. But their worst gaslighting is their way of justifying what nobody in this country wants, these Soviet-style brick cards, digital ID cards issued by the government. You'll have a state number. And whatever they say, you will need this. They say it's to make sure that migrants don't work illegally. Rubbish. It won't make any difference to that at all. They're supposed to have passports or proof of residency and national insurance numbers right now. Well, those guys who get off a small boat and one day later are working for Deliveroo in Folkestone or wherever, they haven't got a national insurance number, so it won't make any difference to illegal working. Illegal working will continue as it always has done. But their justification for this massively un-British assault on our traditional liberty, you know, a papers, please dystopia. Make no mistake, the police will ask you for this card if they stop you. Their justification for this is there is growing public support for government-issued digital IDs. This petition, which was started last Thursday night when soon after Keir Starmer announced this massively unpopular initiative, it is deeply, profoundly unpopular. The petition launched then, it's an official government petition, is a phenomenon. It soared past 2.5 million today and rising. There isn't growing public support for this hideous assault on our freedom. There is growing public furious opposition, right?
So you and I may actually have some disagreement on this. I'm going to be properly consistent on this because I have written an article fairly recently for the Telegraph in which I say that digital ID cards can be a good thing, but here's the most important bit: not under this government. I live in a country which uses ID cards, digital ID cards, and I just don't have a problem with it here where I am. At no point have I found it anything other than actually quite helpful and in many ways very reassuring. And I wrote in my piece that what this means is that someone can come into your home and, you know, fix a dripping tap or carry out some other repair, and you can quite easily leave them in your property and not worry whatsoever that they're going to steal anything, because they all know that if anything disappears, you've got their ID, their employer has their ID, and they will quickly be traced. But that's in this society. That is not in the UK under this totally blundering government and a culture in the UK of jobs worthery. And can you imagine how this would be overreached? You know, can you just imagine the little clipboard people with a little bit of authority just going so over the top? You know, the horrors of COVID taught us that if you give the state, the British state, too much power. They just cannot possibly keep things in proportion. And we already see overreach in so many areas. And I simply don't trust our institutions and the people that work for them to do this properly. And actually, do you know what? I just don't see it happening. I think there is so much opposition to it. Exactly. I don't think it's popular. My position is not a fashionable one. I wouldn't have held this position had I not lived in a country which actually uses them properly. And I cannot see it happening. It's just not going to work, is it?
The level of antipathy around the country towards this, as I said earlier, is literally phenomenal. It really is phenomenal. It's
People
something.
hate it.
There's something, it's just something profoundly un-British. We are not a papers, please society, and we never will be. And if Starmer carries forward with this, it will be his poll tax. People will rise up against it. They really, really will.
It basically only works in a society where there is already total control, where there is already real efficiency, where everything is already so well organised. And you can't just sort of slap this on to our totally chaotic society in which there are probably, I don't know how many, perhaps 1 million people who shouldn't be in the UK. How is this going to work? I just don't see it.
Doesn't make any difference. I mean, there's already a system by which people are not supposed to be able to work unless they have the right documentation, as in, proof of residency and also, of course, your national insurance number. So just adding to that list with these digital ID cards, it's rubbish. This is about socialist control. That's what it is. It's about socialist control. That's what Tony Blair's obsessed with it. He's been obsessed with it for years. They want control over us. But, here's the one thing I will say, I'll pay a compliment to this government now, is that, the little people around the country, we're all so stupid, and we can't really understand things like digital ID cards, can we? So our gratitude to Keir Starmer's new sidekick. I don't know what his official title is, that awful little man. What's his name? Darren Jones. Here he is. This is the guy, by the way, who thinks that the vast majority of migrants coming across the Channel are women and children, as opposed to 75% of them being young men of military age. Anyway, here's Darren. Darren Explains. Here we are.
What is a digital ID? My name is Darren Jones. I'm the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister. Let me explain. A digital ID is an ID on your phone that just proves you are who you are. And when you apply for any new job in the UK already, you have to prove that you have the right to work here. With a digital right to work check, you can do...
Shut up. I mean, talk about infantilising us. I mean, how old are we? 3 years old? What on earth is that about? And by the way, if you must put out some intelligence-insulting video like that, Darren Explains. It's not exactly, particularly rolling off the tongue, is it? It's not very alliterative, is it? Useless and insulting. What on earth do they think they're doing?
I think it's more like Darren depresses, isn't it?
Yeah. Darren's diktat.
Is there anything more depressing than that bloke telling us that? I mean, again... Who are these people in Downing Street and the Cabinet Office that are letting these bits of communication go out? I don't know why they're being paid. Yeah. They are kind of like a reverse publicity machine, just kind of making everything worse. Yeah,
you just want to say, don't you, my name's Darren Jones, I'm Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister. You just go, yeah, of course you are.
Yeah,
Darren Explains. Let me explain to you, Darren. Just do one. Don't insult our intelligence with that nonsense, that claptrap.
In the bin.
In the bin. Yes, exactly.
Get in the bin.
Right, let's go to break and let's talk about a very serious story when we come back. The incredible news that the NHS, our health service, is backing first cousin marriages. These are the marriages favoured particularly by the Pakistani Muslim community, but by Muslims around the world, including here. They're not illegal. But I think they should be. They're dangerous. So we'll talk about that next. Welcome back. I'm still with Talk's international editor, Isabel Oakshott. Isabel, I had a text from Patrick in Gedling, he says, Isabel is so professional, composed and patient. She obviously knows Kevin very well. I don't know what that means. I think it means that you handle my madness with great aplomb.
I love your madness. You know, this is what makes me feel less alone in the world. You know, when and some our listeners won't know that sometimes I just feel the need to share something with Kev during the day on WhatsApp or, you know, on email, and it's usually with capital letters going, "Can you believe this thing?"
Yeah,
and you know, it's all so bonkers, isn't it? Do you remember, I don't know whether they still do it, the Daily Mail used to have this kind of little stamp that they put on stories, which said something like, you know, the world's going mad or something. But the thing is, I think we had to give it up because the whole paper would be covered.
Yeah, exactly right. I always said that, well, it is the sort of unofficial slogan of this show that I don't use enough, but it's stop the madness. I mean, the madness that we are assailed by every day in every way, you know, it's sometimes funny. It's usually extremely worrying, as in this case. This case, we're going to talk about the NHS incredibly backing first cousin marriages, a system that's very common among the British Pakistani community, common among Muslims around the world. You may remember this. This is the MP for Dewsbury and Batley, Iqbal Mohammed. He spoke in the House of Commons not so long ago in favour of this practice of first cousin marriage, which definitively, scientifically, is far more likely to deliver babies with birth defects than marriages between people who aren't first cousins. So it should be banned, really. But this is Iqbal Mohammed, I think it's about a year ago.
We should try to step into the shoes of those who perhaps are not from the same culture as ours, to better understand why the practice continues to be so widespread. An estimated 35 to 50% of all sub-Saharan African populations either prefer or accept cousin marriages, and it is extremely common in the Middle East and in South Asia. I would therefore urge the House to vote against this motion and to find a more positive approach to addressing the issues that are caused by first cousin marriages.
Oh, well, if it's popular in the Middle East and sub-Saharan Africa, let's get on board. In actual fact, what he was doing there, he was opposing a proposal by the Tories to outlaw first cousin marriages. The statistics are alarming. Up to 20% of the children treated for congenital problems in cities like Sheffield, Glasgow and Birmingham are of Pakistani descent, compared with 4% or lower in the wider population. In fact, the general statistic is this, that a kid being born of intermarriage, as they call it, first cousin parent marriages, is around the chances of being born with a birth defect, a genetic condition, is around 2 to 3%. If the parents are not first cousins, it's 4 to 6%. So if you have first cousin marriages, you have your kid is twice as likely to suffer from birth defects than any other kid, and yet the NHS England's genomics education programme says that intermarriage offers benefits which include stronger extended family support systems and economic advantages, and that banning this practice would stigmatise certain communities and cultural traditions. The authority should instead offer genetic counselling, awareness-raising initiatives and public health campaigns. So they are prioritising a kind of wokery towards our Pakistani Muslim community over the welfare of children, who are being born at quite a rate with birth defects. We should just ban this. We should outlaw this practice. And what on earth is the NHS doing backing it?
Yeah, I mean, this is actually very simple as far as I'm concerned. I really don't give a monkey's what goes on in other countries. What we're talking about here in Parliament and with the NHS is what goes on in our own country. And this type of whatever you call it, inter-family marriage, or whatever it is, has no place whatsoever in the UK. All the evidence shows that, as you've just set out very clearly there, that it very significantly raises the risks of health problems and birth defects. And that isn't a price that anyone should be willing to pay. It's not for the NHS to be talking and lecturing about economic advantages and community cohesion. That isn't their job. Their job is to protect and promote health. And this quite clearly doesn't. And I think it would send a really clear message, actually, out to those so-called communities that the NHS is talking about, that actually, you know what, you're in Britain and this is not how we do things in the UK.
Yeah, and this NHS England's genomics education programme goes on to sort of say, well, yeah, you know, sure, it does increase the risk of birth defects, but, you know, so does, shall we say, parents who are a bit too old, or, you know, because they're, you know, advanced in age. So does smoking. So does alcohol use, and some assisted reproductive technologies. Well, what's that got to do with it? What's that got to do with it? What we have here is a definite scientific fact that if first cousins get married, the chances of their kids, their babies, suffering from birth defects, often serious birth defects, are twice the chance of other parents delivering babies with birth defects. Twice. That is serious, and the NHS should be railing against it, not trying desperately to come up with reasons to support it, which are just cultural and woke. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, you know, smoking in pregnancy and drinking in pregnancy and all these things, as they say, are very bad and dangerous. But marriage is a legal institution, one which involves the machinery of the state. You know, whether people smoke or drink too much when they're pregnant is not a legal matter. You know, we don't outlaw those things because it would be impossible to police behind closed doors. But the state can and absolutely does decide whether it can or can't marry people. So in every way, the state has a place in deciding what is and what isn't legitimate. You know, what next? Are they going to say in certain communities maybe it's okay to marry your sibling? I mean, I don't know, but if it's a cousin, you know, why not take it a bit further? I think this is completely unacceptable, and you know, you've just got to look at it from the point of view of the offspring. It isn't good for society, and I don't get this whole, you know, thing about economic advantages or whatever. There's no economic advantages in birth defects or being ill.
Absolutely not. Shocking story. Poor lady in Oxfordshire in a churchyard in the early hours of Sunday morning was gang raped. Several hours after this shocking event caused the church to have to cancel all of its Sunday services. The police had not issued a single description of this gang. I mean, how many people are in a gang? I mean, my feeling is if it's three, you say three. Once you get to 4, 5, that becomes a gang. So I assume we're talking about 4 or 5, maybe more people, right? So people say, well, you know, this lady was gang raped. Apparently another brave lady went to her assistance, so she must have seen something as well. So the victim and this lady who went to her assistance, they must have seen something of these gang rapists. So people are saying, well, where's the description? There's no description of anyone. And you know what people start there, is it asylum seekers again? Is it people that the police don't want to describe in case they seem racist or some crap like that? Well, finally they did respond. A few hours later this morning, they did finally issue a description. They're looking for one white man. So in the gang rape, one white man. So what about the rest of them? Aren't we getting a description of them because they're not white or something? What is going on here? Let's talk to former Met Police Detective Mike Neville. Welcome, Mike. You heard what I was saying there. I mean, it's a very strange sequence of events. As a former copper, you know, you've got this terrible, shocking attack on the early hours of Sunday morning in a churchyard, St Mary's Church in Banbury, in Oxfordshire. You know, if you were involved in this investigation, it'd be very sensitive, but there's a victim. There's also this lady, brave lady, who tried to help her. So you've got two potential witnesses there at least. I mean, wouldn't you be, you know, sensitively trying very hard to get a description as soon as possible? So why no description? What's the point of saying we're looking for some men? I mean, there's no point in that. So under pressure, they finally, the local police force, say, well, yeah, we've got a description of one of them, he's white. That's it. What about the rest of them? What's going on here, do you think, Mike?
Well, we're back to this two-tier argument, aren't we? The police are absolutely terrified. The worst thing that police fear is being accused of racism. They'll happily almost let crimes go unsolved rather than challenge what, you know, this idea that they might be accused of racism. And this isn't the first time. I saw an incident in Devon in August where another attack near a church. We're looking for a suspect. Well, what does this suspect look like in the middle of Devon? You know, you're saying to the public, you know, can you look at your dash cams, your Ring doorbells, your shop CCTV? Well, it's all right saying that, but what exactly are we looking for here? And I think the worst case I've seen of this was a man called, he was eventually sentenced in 2021 as Zephaniah McLeod. This man, he went on a rampage around Birmingham for about 90 minutes. He stabbed and killed one man. He stabbed 7 others and then fled. And while he was missing for several hours, and during the time he was missing, the West Midlands Police simply didn't put out a description. So not only are they not investigating this was an enormous risk to the public not to say this man, he was a black guy, mentally ill. Why aren't they sticking out everything they know so people can, you know, lock the doors and at least avoid this person? Now, we know that the College of Police should have put out guidance to say after the Axel Ruda Cabana to say you've got to, you know, you can't have these voids of information occurring. But what it manifests itself and is what we saw after the incident in Liverpool, where they were quite easy to say, oh, it's a white guy involved, just like the case in Oxford. But all it leaves is that it leaves people to think if they don't say who it is, they're obviously not white. So what the police are achieving is just simply doubling down on what people think already.
Yeah, this is Thames Valley Police, the Cherwell branch of that force, confirming, this is the quote, one of the offenders is said to be a white man. What about the rest of them? Don't they see that if they're going to say one of the offenders is said to be a white man, that the public are going to go, well, what about a description of the rest of them? You know, are you not giving us a description of the rest of them because they're not white? That's what the public will be asking.
It is, Kevin. And what you have, though, is you've got officers who've almost been brainwashed into this. You know, when I went to Hendon, it was almost like a military-style academy. The focus was on fighting crime. Now they go to university and they basically, you know, they lectured in DEI and woke things. And the officers produce, you know, that they're in fear of being accused of racism, because if the thing is what can get you the sack is that accusation, and so people skirt round the edges, they don't give the truth, and the reality is that so little of these crimes are solved. So, for example, rapes, you'd think stranger rapes, there would be, I thought to myself, it must be around 75% of these are solved. Only about 6% of stranger rapes are solved in London, for example. Now, you're not going to solve crime if you're appealing for things and not giving the public the full information so they can check and find it.
As a former detective, you must have investigated this kind of case. I mean, you know, far be it from me to talk about police procedure or pretend I have any knowledge of it, but wouldn't your first priority as the investigating officer, as I said sensitively though, to just desperately try to get descriptions of the suspects? Wouldn't that be your first priority?
Yeah, absolutely. The victim, once the victim's safe and secure, get the information. And I was struck by the Devon case. After like several hours, they hadn't released anything. Well, surely a detective has spoken to this person. No matter, unless somebody's unconscious, they'll be able to give some kind of description of, are they black, white, Asian, Chinese? Who are we looking for? Man, woman, what sort of age? So usually a description can be given. And as I say, in this world of modern technology where, we're driving around with these cameras in our cars and cameras in our shops and cameras on our front door, you've got a lot of chance of getting these people. But how does a shopkeeper check? If you're telling people, oh, it's some men. Well, what kind of men? The shopkeeper can't randomly go through hours and hours of video looking for some men. If you give them an idea, oh, it's a white man in a green hat and a black guy wearing a blue trousers, you've got a chance of getting some detailed descriptions and possibly some CCTV. But with the way they're going on here, they're too afraid, and this has been caused over decades, and it'll take a long time to undo, because the police's fear, as I said to you, the police don't mind being incompetent, but they don't like being accused of racism.
And the headline in the Mail, for example, is this: police only release description of one suspect in Oxfordshire churchyard gang rape. Officers say they are looking for a white man who was part of the group, but fail to describe the rest. Well, I mean, I'd like some, at the very least, I'd like some sort of numerical assessment of what's going on. Yeah. A gang rape, how many people are in the gang? There must be some estimation of this. Well, and as I say, go on.
So I was going to say that, if you say, oh, there's 6 men involved and you're a shopkeeper, you think, oh God, there were 6 guys in here. Like, it wasn't 4 or 8, it was 6. But even if the police clarified it and said, look, the victim was very badly injured, she only saw one person and this is the description she gave. But what they do is offer these vague sort of press releases, and they create a void. And we saw it, in a missing person case, the Nicola Bulley case, where this void was created, the Axel Ruder-Cabana case, a void created, and people telling outright lies, to be honest, about Axel Ruder-Cabana. And despite guidance going out for the highest level, they're still failing to do this. And what they're doing is they continually lose trust and confidence from the public.
Absolutely. Now, I'm not accusing them of this, but if they are withholding descriptive information about these rapists, this gang of rapists, on woke grounds, then that is an egregious thing to do, because we're talking about public safety. If you're withholding information about a dangerous group of men, that's a danger to the public. I mean, I'm not actually saying that they're doing this, but if that is the case, and it does seem to me, Mike, to be a bit of a giveaway. Oh, we've got a gang rape, I don't know, 4 or 5 men. We've only got one description. He's a white guy. We don't know about the rest. Seems to be a bit of a giveaway. If they're deliberately withholding information because they're reluctant to say, well, the rest of them are of Arab description, Middle Eastern or black or whatever. If they're withholding information on that grounds, they're endangering the public with their wokery, aren't they?
Well, they are, and it would be especially bad if there was another attack by these men and descriptions hadn't been circulated, which could have resulted in information which could have had them detained before they did that. They could have made arrest. And so it's a really foolish thing that the police are playing at. And as I say, what they've been doing, in their minds, they're convinced themselves that they are, helping ethnic minorities, they're not doing people down and they're not being racist. But of course, the people from ethnic minorities would want these descriptions as well, because they're just as at risk as anybody else. But the police are obsessed. It is an absolute obsession with race and diversity, and it needs to change, because what it impacts on performance, and when the police don't perform, we're all less safe.
Exactly right, Mike. Very good to talk to you as always. Mike Neville, their former Met Police detective there. I mean, what do you think about this? I just think it's a very strange story. A gang rape, poor lady, gang raped in a churchyard, early hours of Sunday morning in Banbury in Oxfordshire, and no description for quite a long time. Then when finally they say they're looking for a white man. the rest of them? Why are they not even trying to explain why they're saying a white man? You know, if I was the cops and I was releasing that statement, I would say, look, we've only got one decent description, and that's of this guy with a long nose and he's white or whatever, wearing glasses, whatever. Unfortunately, the rest of them were wearing hoods and we have no cogent descriptions. But instead they just say, well, we're looking for a white man. I mean, it's a bit of a giveaway, isn't it? This is a Turkish migrant in the city or the town, Bournemouth, that has become kind of migrant asylum seeker central. 3 notorious asylum seeker hotels there. This guy was staying in the Britannia hotel down there. Anyway, in December he went to a nightclub, caught on CCTV, had some kind of altercation, it was seen on camera, smashing a bottle on the wall, going up to his victim and stabbing him in the back with this broken bottle. His name is Halil Dal, 30 years old. It was a club in Bournemouth called the Camel Club. He admitted assault at court and occasioning actual bodily harm. He was, of course, handed a 24-week prison sentence. So far, so good. But it was suspended for 18 months, which means he is not eligible for automatic deportation. He says he faces persecution at home, and his defence lawyer said that he's suffered mental health problems since breaking into Britain illegally and has attempted suicide and feels hopeless. The court bench chair, someone called Nicola Phillips, said that they only had evidence of minor harm to the victim, and therefore this guy walked free from court, and therefore his application for asylum remains intact. He's not being deported. As I said earlier in the show, what do you have to do as a migrant waiting for asylum, waiting for your asylum application to be approved, to actually be deported? What do you have to do for your application to be turned down?
Well, it's a ridiculous state of affairs. This is absolutely absurd. We obviously have two-tier justice. I don't need to tell any of your listeners and viewers that Lucy Connolly went to prison for 31 months for a tweet. This is absurd. We've become an absolutely absurd country. 24 weeks for stabbing somebody with a broken bottle is absurd. The report says chair of the bench. I don't think this level of ABH should be in a magistrate's court. I think it should have been in a much higher level court, which is where they sent Lucy Connolly. You know, why a mum who sends a tweet has to go to the really serious criminal justice, but a man who shivs somebody with a broken bottle, oh no, he's absolutely fine. And we see it in the disproportionate treatment of paedophiles. We see it time and time again. I'm afraid, Kev, just to explain to your listeners and viewers, my profession is utterly corrupted by a requirement to promote diversity, equality and inclusion. And that was required of me if I wanted to be promoted to a KC. Now, I don't want to be, and I have no interest in, I'm not saying I'm good enough, I'm not arrogant, but, you know, I don't want to try, because I just don't want to show that commitment to diversity, equality. Why should I? What's that got to do with me being one of the best barristers, or trying to say I'm one of the best barristers? If I wanted to take on a judicial role, to become a judge, I'd have to demonstrate my my commitment to diversity, equality and inclusion. This is not secret. It's hidden in a lot of words, but it's published.
Do you get the sense,
is what we do.
Do you get the sense, Stephen, because I do, that when you get an asylum seeker waiting for their application to be processed, who breaks the law in these egregious ways, as I say, we just covered the story of a paedophile found guilty or admitting paedophile offences, child sex abuse, not sentenced to prison, well, in fact, suspended sentence. Therefore, if not custodial, doesn't have to be deported. Same situation with this guy in Bournemouth. Stabbed a guy in the back, not given a custodial sentence, therefore doesn't have to be deported. Do you get the sense there's a kind of policy here? If it's an asylum seeker, try to avoid sending them to prison because, oh my God, then we'll have to deport them.
Yes, and it's not a conspiracy. So the easiest thing to sort of fling at you and I suppose now me, is the idea that we're conspiracy theorists. These are the beliefs of my fellow barristers and the people I mingled with socially. This is what they believe, that migrants are inherently good and that ordinary people of Britain are racist and morally bad. And it is that simple. You've seen it today in Keir Starmer's speech. He has a completely disjointed idea of who the working people. Sorry, he has a slight speech impediment, so he doesn't say working people properly. And I like to tease him, because teasing is also a great British value. But he has this view of working class people which is not in any way accurate, and they genuinely feel that their moral duty, their moral obligation, is to look after the people who illegally break into our country, to treat them with kid gloves, to give them free accommodation in 4-star hotels, to eventually give them free properties, to give them all of our money. And the rest of us is just sat here open mouthed going, how can you believe such ridiculous things? I honestly think, Kev, that they have rebuilt the Palace of Versailles. I think that they live in such gilded lives, so cut off from ordinary people, that they're going to end up in the same way. And in many ways, you can call it self-preservation, that I didn't want to join them. There's no way that the current elite is going to last very long. They're obviously just against the people.
If you are filmed, if you, I mean, it's all about premeditation. If you're filmed smashing a bottle on the wall, going up to your victim, stabbing them. By the way, as he approached the victim, he's doing this all the time. Then he stabbed him. The chairman of the bench, or the chairwoman of the bench, effectively is saying, well, you know, by a stroke of luck, you didn't actually inflict any serious injuries. You know, that stabbing in the back, he only ended up with light injuries. Therefore, your sentence is light. Somebody who does that in a premeditated way, smashes the bottle, stabs his victim in the back, that's a prison sentence, isn't it?
It should be, and if she's a magistrate, she depresses me, because I think one of the ways we can fix this is by bringing the magistrates back, getting rid of the professional judge class, who are very easy to corrupt into certain beliefs and practices, just by self-interest. This is not a conspiracy theory. You just make self-interest flow in a certain direction, and surprise, surprise, human beings will behave a certain way. But she's obviously just looking for brownie points from those above. I mean, this guy should have gone to prison.
I think it's fair to say, safe to say, that millions of decent or normal people around the country are sick to death of this crazy wokery, woeful wokery that gets madder and madder. You know, you can't say man overboard anymore because that's not gender specific, that's not inclusive. If somebody's drowning, I don't think anybody particularly cares whether or not the term you shout is inclusive. Manhole, you can't say that. Anything with the word man, you can't say anymore. This particular example that I'm going to give you now, I just think is the moment we hit ground zero. From this, we have to bounce back. We have to say no more. It is a local football association, Berks and Bucks, so that's Berkshire and Buckinghamshire Football Association, the FA, the official FA, have advised male players in your team that the term "come on lads" should from now on be banned. So you're playing football, I used to play football myself a lot. You know, come on lads. That's banned because it's not inclusive and it's too gender specific. Well, if it's a bunch of blokes, what's wrong? I mean, I wouldn't have thought that women, female football team, would say, come on, lads, obviously. But blokes playing football together, shouting, come on, lads, according to the Berks and Bucks Football Association, should not say that. They should not say, come on, lads, because it's not inclusive and it's not, and it's too gender specific. What a load of rubbish. Let's talk to Olympic medalist, Olympic legend, Sharon Davis. Hi, Sharon.
Good evening, Kevin. Do you know what you say? This has to be like we've got to the bottom. I just don't believe we have.
We keep saying it, don't we, every time?
It really does. I mean, you know, you're saying, come on, lads. I mean, I was looking at this list, and obviously they got linesman, it has to be assistant ref. You can live with that. But the one that I find the most offensive is they're not supposed to say mother. they're supposed to say parent or carer, and they're not supposed to say bring your wife. They're supposed to say bring your partner. I mean, if you've got a wife, why can't you bring your wife? If you've got a mother, why would you not refer to her as your mother? I just it's all silly, and it's the waste of money. I think that's the most annoying with all of this. There is a 12-strong inclusion advisory board to give this advice out and to try to implement it. And what an utter waste of money, when you could be using that money to encourage kids to be involved in sport, to be physically active, which is going to help them to be healthier, both physically and mentally. We've just got this arse about face. I was going to say something ruder than that.
That's okay, you can say that, definitely. I mean, as you say, the Berks and Bucks Football Association, in their wisdom, have not only told male players not to shout, "Come on, lads." I don't know if you've ever watched any park football. I used to play a lot of it myself. I mean, it is a cacophony every 3 seconds. Like, "Come on, lads, come on, lads." I mean, what is wrong with that? And as I just said, it's not like a female football team. They'd be shouting, "Come on, lads." What on earth is wrong with blokes shouting, "Come on, lads," when they're playing football? Where do they find offence in that?
Well, and they're not even supposed to use the word guys, you know, "Come on, guys, everybody get together, guys, let's be successful, guys," whatever. I think it's just, it's almost insulting that we don't have any common sense to be able to apply to certain situations. You know, if we have got footballers there that are gay and they've got husbands, then those people are not going to refer to their husbands as wives, are they? You know, it's just insulting that we can't use our own common sense to be decent, respectful to each other, and that we have to have a 12-strong advisory panel to, you know, to make us all inclusive. And what we know from statistics is this isn't working. You know, this isn't actually encouraging more people to do sport. It's putting people off sport. The same way allowing men to identify as women and go into changing rooms and go into women's competition was putting women off from doing sport. It's not working. And I think we've got to understand that all of this stuff is actually rather ridiculous, really, and a terrible waste of money.
Ridiculous is the word. I mean, what kind of a person decides that you have to ditch the term "come on, lads" because it does not contribute to building a more welcoming environment? Who would feel unwelcome by a football team, lads in a football team, shouting "come on, lads"? Who would be made to feel unwelcome by that? Anyone?
No, absolutely nobody. You know, and we know that sport is really good for including people, making people feel like they're in a team environment, that they can target set, that they can focus, you know, that keeps them physically fit, it gets them off their mobile telephones. All of these things are really good for our mental and our physical health. So we just want to encourage people to be more involved in sport. We stop wanting to put hurdles in front of them or word soup in front of them, or create, you know, offence where offence doesn't actually exist. That's the problem as well. You know, we're telling people to be offended when they're not offended in the first place.
Exactly right. Can I, Britt, take you on to a big unfolding story as we speak? J.K. Rowling, obviously the Harry Potter author, who has actually maintained an extremely dignified silence, I've thought, over the years, when, you know, in acts of just extraordinary ungratefulness. The stars, the kid stars of Harry Potter, Daniel Radcliffe, Emma Watson, what's the other one called, Rupert Grint, have all lashed into her and said, oh, she, you know, attacked her position on women's rights. And finally, JK has hit back at Emma Watson in particular, who, by the way, I mean, Here's how you can feel old. Emma Watson's 35 years old. Did you realise that? I didn't.
I know, absolutely. My kids all grew up on Harry Potter and we're still loving it. You know, the grandkids are on it now. Yeah, absolutely amazing. I think she has remained very, very, what's the right word, stoic, civilised. You know, she stayed out of retaliation, I think. I think it was just one step too far for Emma Watson to come out and start saying that she'd sent nice letters when actually, when JK was genuinely getting serious death threats, you know, and she had to bring in a tremendous amount of safeguarding and bodyguards and security to make sure that she was safe, you know, at that particular time. So it's the hypocrisy of the whole situation. I mean, personally, it's not going to surprise you that I'm on, you know, JK Rowling's side.
So am I. So am I. I mean, I think what's interesting is that, as I say, JK Rowling has let them get on with it. You know, she gave them their break. as she said about Emma Watson, poor Emma, you know, what could she ever know about anything of real life? I made her a multi-millionaire when she was 14 years old. She doesn't really know very much. I love her phrase that poor Emma doesn't realise how ignorant she is of her own ignorance.
Yeah,
and so she's hit back in this 600-word rebuttal to Emma Watson. But it's interesting, isn't it, that J.K. Rowling has only sort of lost it and hit back at the point where Emma Watson has said, oh, you know, me and J.K., I want to be her friend again, I didn't really mean anything. And I think what's being said, the subtext of this is Emma Watson's career is not exactly firing on all cylinders and hasn't been for quite a few years. And I think, as J.K. Rowling suggests, she said all three of these kids, when it suited them, when they thought it was good for their career, they attacked me and my views on women's rights. And now it looks like Emma Watson is trying to get back into my good books to maybe reboot her career. That's what this is all about, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, I can speak from experience. The last 10 years has been really hard fighting for women's sport, you know, and there was an awful lot of people that didn't say anything for many, many years. And now it's been turning around and we've got, you know, sex screening coming into the world of athletics and you know, winter sports and to boxing and hopefully the Olympic Games in LA. You know, people are you know, have always really secretly said we shouldn't have men in women's sport, but a tremendous amount of people kept their head down and said absolutely nothing. And now it's a little bit more acceptable to say, do you know what, women should have fair sport. There's a few people coming out of the woodwork, and I can tell you in sport, there's many that should have done their job properly and didn't, you know, stayed quiet, and all they did was protected their position and their jobs rather than protecting women's rights. And what JK has always done, you know, someone who had so much money, and she literally could have just stayed out of this argument, but she knows, you know, she when she wrote Harry Potter, she was doing it in a cafe because there was no heating in a one-bedroom flat. That's right. You know, she understands what it's like, and she knows with the whole trans debate, really, it's women from deprived backgrounds that are going to be the ones that are suffering. It's not Hollywood that have got all of the money, you know, and they're never likely to be in a position. Let
me just quickly read what J.K. Rowling said about Emma brilliantly. She said, like other people who've never experienced adult life uncushioned by wealth and fame, Emma has so little experience of real life, she's ignorant of how ignorant she is. I wasn't a millionaire at 14. It's beautifully put and sort of sums it all up. But I still...
She's a clever woman, isn't she, Kevin? She's a really clever woman. I think it's the lack of young people's critical thinking that's very, very scary at the moment. You know, they seem to go down this sort of cult route where they're not even capable of debating, and because their argument doesn't stand up to a debate, they're not even interested in listening. And I think that was probably the biggest problem with Emma Watson and, you know, and the other two, was that they weren't interested in listening to the actual facts. They were just virtual signaling because it served their purpose.
Absolutely. Sharon, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. Great to talk again. Thank you very much for your time. That's Sharon Davis, Olympic legend. What do you think about what she's saying? Come on, lads, she can't say that anymore. I mean, even as a fan, you know, you're always shouting that, come on, lads. That's not inclusive enough. Too gender specific. How ridiculous. In the studio, as I said, I've got former Met Police Detective John Wedger. Before I think we both express our fury about the mayor's obfuscation. I mean, how can, you know, do we have rape gangs operating in London? Could you explain the question? I mean, what do you mean? What do you mean? How dare you? How dare you, you little pipsqueak, avoid that very direct and obvious question? Now, here, John Wedger, former police detective from the Met Police, is going to tell us now why we ought to be very, very worried about the mayor dodging these kind of questions. Tell us what you've found out, what you've been investigating, John.
Yeah, I mean, I'll concur. I mean, the anger I felt when I watched the interview there with Susan Hall, I mean, I can't express it, but this is a criminality which has been deliberately under-policed and ignored for a long, long time.
Here in London?
Here in London. If we look, 80% of all serious and organised crime occurs in London, nationally occurs in London, and that's a National Crime Agency statistic. London is one of the largest, you know, urban conurbations in the Western world. It is undoubtedly the most diverse city in the world. And to say that this sort of abuse and criminality, vile criminality, does not go on is a massive lie. And I'm living testimony to the fact that it does go on, because I investigated this 20 years ago. And what I
When
found,
you were still a cop, yeah?
When I was a detective, yeah. And what I found was staggering. So staggering, in fact, when we look, because all we hear about are the provincial towns.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Rochdale, Rotherham.
Yeah,
all that,
and predominantly Kashmiri taxi drivers. Yeah. Let me tell you something. It is bigger and more diverse than that. The perpetrators are as diverse as a population, you know. And what we had was kids. The one consistency was the children were vulnerable. They were from the care system, whether, albeit a looked after child, a foster child, or a child within residential
How old were
care.
these kids?
They ranged from 9 years to 14.
Okay, so tell us exactly what was happening to these kids.
These were children.
Or what maybe is happening.
Yeah, it's still, well, it's going on because they removed people like myself from the front line.
So tell us what
these
what
are
you found
children
out.
that are predated on due to their vulnerability. The grooming process has always been the same. It's an algorithm, and it will be used whether it's in the ecclesiastical homes or whatever. It's children that are coerced into sexual activity for some sort of
So these
reward.
kids are mostly, they're living in care homes.
They're care homes.
Orphanages.
So they'll be picked up. One case we dealt with, it was a woman, it was a prostitute that was picking them up.
Yeah.
She was sort of looking after them, doing their hair for them, doing their nails. She would then introduce them to men. They'd maybe watch pornography. They start smoking cannabis. And then this prostitute would then engage in a sexual activity with a guy and then encourage the girl to do the same.
How old would this girl be, for example?
Like I say, they range from 9 to 14. The average age was about 13, 14.
And who's paying for this service? Who are the guys?
Right, so the kids that I dealt with, so there were two major sort of criminal gangs that were operating when I was looking at them. So one in central London, the kids would be picked up in the morning and they were taken to a crack house. And anyone who's ever been in one of them places, they're the most despicable, awful, vile scenes. Yeah. The children were traded for 10 rocks a go within the...
10 rocks of crack,
yeah, per child, to all the degenerates in the crack house. From there, they would then be taken to hotels around the Paddington, Sussex Gardens area. Yeah. So we had low-budget hotels which catered for the builders that came down from the north for a lot, the white van men, as they used to be called. There'll be a room put aside for an hourly rate, so the girls would be taken in there and they would be then introduced to these builders, whatever, would have sex with these kids. Yeah. From there, the kids were then taken to upmarket, like Arab restaurants around Mayfair and Curzon Street, and there they could be traded for as much as £2,000 per child per night.
What kind of numbers of kids are we talking about here?
Right, so when I started looking into it, it was 1, then it went to 2, then it went to 3. On one occasion, I found 10 children in 10 minutes. By the end of 3 days, I found 52 children.
Oh, my God.
And one thing I must add is that some of these kids are actually also put on the street, and I want to give Beth Harry an example in a minute. They're put on the street and traded like a common prostitute, as we'd term it. And some of these kids had HIV, AIDS, they had contagious tuberculosis, they had hepatitis C and had scabies. They had life-threatening diseases. And these are children that were meant to be subject to care orders.
And these care homes that they were living, were they sort of part of the problem? Were they sort of trading the kids out?
The problem is they were never approached properly by the police. So when a child goes missing, a missing persons form is made out. So a kid would...
the care homes were complicit in this. They were
not really what I found. What I found was the system was more complicit than a care home. The care homes had never officially been approached by the dedicated police unit. So I would say to a care home, right, how many children have you got? And let's say 5, for example. Now, the problem is care homes have changed now, and we've got these, they're called... it's not assisted care, it's when they leave the care. And so it's usually about 15, 16. They go into these unregulated care homes. And the care home could be paid between £1,000 to £2,000 per week per child. So if you've got 5 kids that are vulnerable, maybe with issues, you could be getting 10 grand a week for them. Right, they would go missing usually on a Thursday. A car would be waiting for them at the top of the road. Sometimes the care staff even wrote down the number plate of the car. The kids would go off and they would usually be presented back about Tuesday, Monday, late Monday or Tuesday, but they would be in an unfit state because they'd be coming down from the effects of crack cocaine use, heroin use, and
it's just little kids.
Yeah, some of them had terrible sexual injuries. But the care homes at times were happy because while the kid was away for the majority of the week, they wasn't causing any trouble in the care home.
Right.
Social services were happy because the kid now was with what they thought was a boyfriend but really was a Romeo, a pimp. So the kid, and had money. So
they turned a blind eye in the matter of these.
Totally. The whole system turns a blind eye.
So, John, tell us, so you're a serving officer, you went to your senior officers, your commanders, as it were. What happened?
I was told, so I compiled an intelligence report because the children were at risk of their life, some of them. So I put in a report what was going on to the kids, because there was only 2 of us appointed for London for this. And I was told by a senior officer for the unit, John, if this ever gets out, you will lose your home, your job and your children. This must not and will not ever get out. This will we all know what that means. The Met Police, past, present and future, if you speak to anyone about this, I guarantee you will be thrown to the wolves.
And again, what year would this have been?
2005, 2006.
And do you have reason to know this is still going on?
Well, of course it's going on because this level of criminality needs a proactive approach. It will not present itself like normal criminality. You need to go looking for it. And the police do not do that anymore. They're what they call fire brigade police. They wait for it to present itself.
Yeah, I see what you mean. They're not proactive.
No.
Yeah. And when did you leave the police?
I left the police officially in 2017.
And have you talked to the cops since then about this ongoing scourge?
The police knew about it. Hogan Howe knew about it. Cressida Dick knew about it. Right. It was even brought up by the Police and Crime Minister, Sir Mike Penning. He was even told to back away from it by Theresa May. So it goes right to the stop.
But if you went to the cops now, or if they came to you, you could provide them with addresses, how the system works. Maybe, I don't know. Do you know names?
I've got names. I've got phone numbers. I gave evidence in 2022 to the independent inquiry. Right, I provided the most comprehensive and lengthy statement of 52 pages, and it contained names, dates, intelligence reports, original notes. No one ever.
This is to the police. Have you or anyone else tried to take this information to the mayor's office?
Not to the. I've taken it to Parliament. I took it to the Home Office. That's the highest I went with it, and then it went nowhere.
This is what the London Mayor said of all of this. These accusations. This is what John's talking about. These accusations are false, malicious and politically motivated. The Mayor is committed to doing everything in his power to build a safer London for everyone, and has always been clear that all violence against women and girls must be treated with the utmost urgency, both by our police and society as a whole. What do you say to that?
Well, how despicable. You know, an absolute liar. The man is a total and utter moron. This criminality is going on and children are at risk for their lives when this carries on. It is unbelievable. To my knowledge, there is no dedicated unit. When I was removed from that unit, right, in think it was circa 2007, they never appointed anyone else to look at it until Jimmy Savile was exposed for what he was up to. They were embarrassed into doing something about it. They need to make crimes against children priority, sexual offending against children priority. I can show them. I can take them now. I guarantee them within a small period of time, I will find them children involved in this crime.
So you presumably, though, when you were a serving officer and since then, you presumably always implicitly said, look, I've got all this information. Come to me, I can help. And yet you've been rejected.
I've gone to main media agencies, that all the top papers have had this. It was only when Express picked up the lead. And I said, I've got it. But the biggest thing, Kevin, here is the inquiry had it. The Justice J, the ICSA inquiry had this in 2022, right? And after evidence was given, because I was one of the main core participants with Maggie Oliver, they went on about her stuff up north, not one mention.
Why do you think that? Why do you think that is?
They don't want it coming out about London. Once you open the lid on this, Kevin, you'll never put it back.
Bearing in mind that the mayor, Sadiq Khan, is like officially like the head of the Met Police.
He is, yeah.
He's in charge.
He's the crime commissioner for London. He should be coming to me. He should be sitting down with me. He should want to stamp on this, but he's doing nothing.
And what do you think when you see him there obfuscating, acting? I mean, I think it's extraordinary. I mean, you know, by all means, I mean, it might be a lie, but if he wants to deny there's any rape gang activity in London, do so. But he's acting like he doesn't understand what the rape gang scandal is.
Kevin, when I watched that interview with Susan Hall, and he just engaged in a seminar of semantics, it was puerile, unprofessional and pathetic of a man of his standing, of his position, to play games, word games like that, when children at that very moment, and even now, are being pimped out on the streets.
So you're offering right here and now, if the Met Police want to get to grips with what you're talking about, you're available to help.
Yeah, and I'll tell you now, if I can find 10 kids in 10 minutes on my own, you think with national backing, national police backing, what we could do. We could really make these streets safer. And when you abuse a child, you don't just abuse that kid physically, you tear out their soul.
Yeah, God, it's an awful story to hear. But to summarise, I guess, London, in your expert view, does have a rape gang problem.
Massive. It is a huge rape gang problem, and those offending are of every ethnicity going, you know, and be of every gender going.
It's extraordinary. Well, listen, John, we'll keep in touch, and you know, we've got contacts at the police. We'll see if we can get them interested. They certainly should be, in my view. And listen, thank you very much for bringing us this really disturbing story. Have a think about that, folks. You got John Wedger here, a former Met Police detective. He's saying definitively, no ifs, no buts, London, like so many other cities and towns around the country, has a clear and present rape gang problem.
Can I have one last call out?
Please,
I want to address Mark Rowley.
Yeah.
You know, Mark, you knew what was going on with me. Mark was the assistant commissioner when I was in the midst of a four-year bullying campaign.
You spoke to him about it, yeah?
He knows all about this because he adjudicated over my retirement. He knows exactly what's going on here, and he pushed forward for my, my early retirement on this. So he knows. And I was saying, Mark, you're quite a reasonable guy when I dealt with you. Do the right thing. Do the right thing, and do the right thing for the citizens of this beautiful city and for the children, because they're being hurt, Mark, and you've got the boys and girls that can stop it, and I will help you to do that. I'll do that pro bono.
Well, thank you, John. I've got to say, for legal reasons, of course, Mark Rowley isn't here to respond to what John's saying. We will certainly get in touch with him. Straight over now to the Director for the Centre for Migration Control, Robert Bates. Hi, Robert.
Good evening, Kev. Thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure, mate. Well, look, I've just been talking to Danny Kruger. The sheer scale of the number of migrants that have been coming across the channel since Saturday is phenomenal. We expect that by tomorrow, in 5 days, it will have been more than 2,000. So far since Saturday, 1,899. So the one in, one out deterrent, not exactly firing on all cylinders, is it? Now, let's talk about what Starmer's been up to since his speech, his rallying cry to the Labour faithful at the Labour conference. He went on the media today, the Today programme on Radio 4 and other outlets, and he said that Nigel Farage is to blame for the migrant crisis because it's Brexit that is causing this problem, this crisis. And that's because Brexit took Britain out of the Dublin Convention. The Dublin Convention, while we were in the EU, did indeed allow us to return asylum seekers to the EU, and they could return theirs to us. Now, that's just a lie. I mean, yes, we're out of the Dublin Convention. I'll give you an example. In 2018, for example, Britain asked to return 5,500 asylum seekers to Europe under the Dublin Convention. Europe agreed to 209 of them. So in an entire year under the Dublin Convention, we returned to Europe, to the EU countries, 209 asylum seekers. Meanwhile, under the terms of that same convention, the UK was forced to accept 1,215 migrants back from EU countries. So there you have it. That year we were sort of in deficit, if you like, to the tune of 1,000 migrants. So the Dublin Convention never ever did allow us to advantageously return our migrants to Europe, because in fact we ended up with more. So when he cites the Dublin Convention, it's either due to sheer ignorance or more likely he's just lying. And incredibly, because he says, well, without Brexit we'd have still been in the Dublin Convention and everything would have been fine, we'd have been, you know, solving the migrant crisis wouldn't exist. And because of that, he is now dubbed the dinghies that are coming across right now in their droves from France Farage boats. Who does he think he's kidding?
Yeah, he's a barefaced liar. He's lost his mind over the last couple of days, of course, not just on this, but when it comes to talking about reforms, indefinitely to remain policy as well. So this is a man that spent pretty much the entirety of the 2016 to 2019 period vociferously campaigning against Brexit. It is pretty much the very core of who he is as a politician. This is someone that was absolutely obsessed with the Remain campaign and the rearguard Remain campaign, even after that referendum. And you're absolutely right to cite those statistics. The Dublin regulations effectively, especially when the migrant crisis really kicked off in Europe after 2015, effectively allowed Europe to use the UK as its dumping ground. We took, under that scheme, almost 3 times as many migrants from Europe as we were actually able to return. And even then, they were small numbers. And as you say, many of our requests were being rejected. And we're now at a point now where the small boats crisis is such a big, salient political issue that Starmer is really desperately tried to link it to an issue where he feels more comfortable, put himself on terrain where he feels like he's able to talk with authority, which is Brexit. I think it's a ridiculously large jump to try and pin in any way, shape or form the explosion of the small boats onto Brexit, because of course they were starting in 2018, whilst despite having voted to leave, we were still a member of the European Union. He's doing all he can to avoid taking any accountability for the proliferation and the explosion of small boats crossings that we've seen under his watch. I think we're about to hit 58,000 have crossed since he became Prime Minister, and they're being put up in hotels across the country at our expense, at the taxpayers' expense. They're committing crimes, sometimes heinous crimes, sometimes allegedly crimes. They're costing us an absolute fortune, and all the while they're being given absolute goodies left, right and centre as well. So the whole system is broken, and I think blaming it on Brexit is really desperately trying to reheat arguments that were won way back 6 years ago now.
So it's just not true that Brexit caused the migrant crisis. It's a preposterous suggestion. It's a preposterous thing to say. And then to label them, I'm not here to sort of eulogise about Nigel Farage, but to try to call these dinghies coming over from France Farage boats, that is desperate stuff, isn't it?
And it's something that no one would believe because it's so palpably ridiculous. And of course, actually what Brexit has done is it's liberated us from the mess that the EU is heading towards with its current asylum pact, which would actually see countries such as Britain, if we were still a member, burdened with even more migrants being sent from those frontier countries on the Mediterranean and in Eastern Europe. There's a whole sort of idea of a greater sharing of the burden. That would actually mean that we were having to take even more from Europe. So in a way, we should actually be thanking Brexit and the liberation of our sovereignty from the EU superstate for delivering us a situation where we're not getting dragged into the mess. Because although we have our own problems on our border, the way things are heading in certain parts of Europe really are disastrous. And I think so long as we manage to make ourselves completely unentailed with whatever is going on there. And this is why the France deal is such a concern, because it seems to be starting to edge us back towards European cooperation. If we can keep ourselves at arm's length from the chaos on the continent, then we've got a better chance of stopping the boats and stopping illegal migration than we would do if we were still in the EU.
Michelle Mone, Baroness Bra, is connected to her husband's company, MedPro. In the height of the COVID panic, our then future I'm a Celebrity contestant, but then the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, and Boris Johnson approved giving this pair £122 million for a load of really dodgy medical PPE gowns from China. They weren't sterile, they didn't work, but these two managed to pocket the money. The High Court yesterday told them they've got to repay that. Doug Barrowman, her husband, says this is a whitewash. Baroness Mone has yet to say anything about it. But the question is, first of all, I mean, I think she has to leave the House of Lords. That's it. She cannot, even Rachel Reeves, I don't often agree with her, but she said today, I don't see how this woman can continue to help legislate for this country in the House of Lords. I think that's right. She has to go. But the question I want to ask you is, what the hell was going on that our government, taxpayers' money, just handed 122 million quid to this pair without checking the PPE or anything? We paid for it, then it turned up, it was completely useless. What was going on then?
Well, I'll tell you exactly what was going on. I, of all people, know, because I saw all the messages that were flying between the Health Secretary and these various characters. And I actually remember seeing detailed messages from Michelle Mone. That's all been covered in the media, you know, very, very pushy messages about this stuff. And what was going on is that a very small number of politicians, of which Matt Hancock, the then Health Secretary, was one, were not only in a sort of blind panic, but they were also on a gigantic kind of vanity trip. You know, they wanted to show that they were, you know, amassing the greatest amount of kit and, you know, being the busiest and being the most protective of the nation and saving as many lives as possible. And all judgment went out of the window, didn't it?
Yeah.
And what was grotesque is that there were so many people in our country whose instinct under those circumstances was to exploit that. Their instinct in the outbreak of a pandemic was, wow, there's a good business opportunity here, isn't there?
Yeah.
I have to say, you know, I'm sure up and down the country, so I'm sure many of our listeners feel like this. You know, we read about the people that somehow made, you know, even several million, not even tens of millions or 100 million or whatever, several million, by at that time thinking, oh, maybe I should import some PPE, and thought to ourselves, oh, I should have thought of that. But no, actually, I'm really glad that I didn't think of that, because it genuinely did not occur to me, and nor did it occur to 99 point whatever percent of the population to try to make money out of the horrors of the beginning of the pandemic and the panic that ensued. It is grotesque. It is totally immoral. And people like Michelle Mone and her partner, of all people, did not need to do that. They don't need any more money. They should be volunteering to give it back, and they should have done so a long time ago.
Totally right, but they're going to have to now. Yeah, disgusting behaviour by them, and ridiculous behaviour by our panicking government, wasting taxpayers' money like that. You're just the person to talk to about that, weren't you, because of your WhatsApp exclusive. Listen, Isabel, great to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time tonight. Listen, we're going to go straight back to Manchester, where our man Alex Farrell, done a great job today reporting from the synagogue, is with Lord John Mann, who is the government's anti-Semitism advisor. Welcome, both of you. Welcome back. Hello, John. Thank you for joining us. I can see it's raining and difficult.
Evening.
It's raining and difficult there. What are your feelings about the government and what the Jewish community are saying today, that, for example, the recognition of Palestine has only fostered this ongoing kind of explosion of anti-Semitism that possibly led to today's atrocity. What's your feeling about that?
No, what the community is in shock, in trauma. I mean, nobody's been murdered in our country for being Jewish for very many decades, and unlike other countries where there have been murders, people have seen it, they've experienced it, they've been through other terror attacks, not least in Manchester, but to have it direct in your own community, you know, two Jewish people going about their normal lives as British citizens, going to their synagogue on the holiest day for Yom Kippur, getting murdered simply and solely because they're Jewish. The whole country needs to take a deep breath about the consequences and what that means. You know, this is a national moment for us, and not just government needs to step up, the country needs to step up in standing in solidarity with the Jewish community, and that means people who know Jewish people, neighbours or in their workplace, going and telling them, you know, we're with you in this, we're not prepared to have this in our country, and you know, while it's going on this afternoon, after people have been murdered, we have people been abused at a synagogue in the south of England by extremists yelling at them out of a van as they're passing. Now, that's not the same level, of course, but the same principle of people abusing Jewish people simply for being Jewish. And the country needs to get a grip of this and stand by its Jewish community.
Couldn't agree with you more, John, but they do say, and it's been said a lot today, that if you reward terrorism, it promotes more terrorism. The Prime Minister stands accused of recognising Palestine and in so doing rewarding Hamas's atrocity on October the 7th. And many Jewish people today are saying that has led, the pro-Palestine policies of this government have led to today's violence. What are your thoughts on that?
No, we've had anti-Semitic violence across Europe for the last 10 years. We've had people murdered repeatedly in France over the last 10 years. We've had people murdered in the United States three times in the last 18 months. So no, there's all sorts of factors in it, but anti-Semitism's become deep-rooted in our society, and there are people on the extremes who feel it's appropriate to abuse Jewish people, and some people who feel that they can go and kill Jewish people. And so what we've seen in the United States, 3 times Jewish people being murdered for being Jewish, we've now seen coming to this country. There's, you know, people want to conflate and attack Jewish people and hold them responsible for what's happening in the Middle East. Conflating the two issues is wrong. It's a red herring. This is about evil. This is about people who believe that Jewish people are evil. That's what it is. Actually, it's them that are evil. In their distorted minds, in the caricatures they have of Jewish people, the lies they tell about them, and the way they spew out that vengeance against them. This is what leads to the violence we've seen today, and our failure to deal with that kind of thing, wherever it is, how people say it, how they write it, how they put it on the internet, that's at the core of what we need to get our act together to deal with, because we've had enough of it. Murders of Jewish people in France, murders of Jewish people in America, murders of Jewish people in Denmark, in the Netherlands, and now in this country. Enough is enough. Let's fight back against this.
I agree with that. Now, since October the 7th, 2 years ago, anti-Semitic incidents in this country are up by 140%. Sorry to labour this point, but I want to ask you, John, was the Prime Minister right to recognise Palestine?
That's an irrelevant question.
Well, was he right? Can I ask you, was he right? It isn't an irrelevant question. I'm sorry, John.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry,
John. You're out of order.
You're
out of order.
I am not out of order. It is a perfectly reasonable question. Was he right to recognise Palestine?
It's irrelevant. It's an irrelevant question.
You think it's irrelevant, John? Are you joking? Are you joking? It is not an irrelevant question.
It's an irrelevant question. What's relevant is the security good enough? Is the support for the community good enough? Is the strategies for tackling extremism and hatred good enough? They're the relevant questions.
So you won't
for
say
government,
whether or
and
not
they're the
you think the
questions that
Prime
I'm
Minister was
addressing.
right to recognise Palestine. You won't tell us that. You won't tell us whether or not...
I'll tell you that. I'll tell you it in another interview. I'm quite happy to discuss the
Well,
Middle East.
why don't you tell us in this interview?
But I am not conflating. I am not
It's
conflating.
not
I'll challenge
conflating.
those who conflate.
It's a perfectly reasonable
because you start
question.
then blaming, or others blame Jewish people. For
And what do you think
happens in
Jewish
the
people
Middle
are
East.
saying today? That it was brilliant that he recognises Palestine.
In this country.
Sorry, John, you're a very good man. I remember when you clashed with Jeremy Corbyn, but I think you should answer this question.
I tell you what,
was the Prime Minister right to recognise
mate,
Palestine?
I tell you what, mate, you're part of the problem.
Oh,
you're part of the
really?
problem,
Really? Am
right?
I?
You're part of the problem with questions like that. Yes, you are.
think that's an
you should
unreasonable
be dealing with
question?
the problems of anti-Semitism.
Sorry, John.
People murdered today,
it's not an
and you want to
unreasonable
go
question.
in, and there's plenty of others do as well, on all sides of the argument, want to talk about other issues. The issue is Jewish people being murdered today for being Jewish, and the fact that's happened in our country. And thank goodness the police have been so good today, because it could have been far worse. Thank goodness that the Jewish volunteers were there, and that what they did was incredible today, including the work they did with people with serious injuries. They're the heroes of today, and get them on your programme and let them talk.
We will, John. Let's part friends and let's agree on that. It's been a horrific day. Thank you very much, Lord John Mann there, the government's anti-Semitism czar. I mean, let me know, was that a reasonable question?